counter it because it was just too easily read. So I guess to be fair, it's technically 2, but that's still too many, you'd like to say, as you do see Xavier still on the Sombra Goats composition for now. Fire Society, as you'd expect to be starting out on the Rhine Goats.
Bello going to be on Baptiste, so...
And Thea going to go back to spawn.
Yep. And now so are the rest of Xavier.
The quickest, like, in and out little play. What are you actually seeing that is interesting is Fire Society very quickly trying to push on this, and this may be a mistake because they've lost their positioning. Now, they kind of need to regain this. They start on the high ground, and as Xavier re-push in, I mean, Fire Society, okay, they do get to go back up there in time, but Xavier could have probably have pushed.
Played that on a knife's edge. I do like Aros's positioning here as well. I do not believe he's been detected now. I think Queen does know about him now.
Oh,
ooh, hello.
Interesting charge.
Charge from Satrok doesn't find anything except the corner. Arrows
but again,
hack.
They've lost this high ground. This gives now Xavier the free rotation to the high ground themselves, and I think for Fire Society, just a little bit too eager in the trigger finger.
Now Xavier are starting to charge up ultimates. High ground really benefits them as well, actually, with this Baptiste, who you see has the ultimate available already. So, I mean, as much as this isn't the right comp for a big pitched battle, they can still get a lot of damage done onto Fiery Society before pushing down onto the point itself. But Fiery Society have kind of mitigated this pretty well.
And yeah, there wasn't that much damage coming through. You'd expect that for Xavier at least to charge up some ultimates with the Ant Matrix, but that just didn't quite happen. Now Queen's trying to go on top of this point. The good news is with the Baptiste on the high ground, they will have that play still to make, but they don't have other ultimates. Looking for Society.
Ooh, that is a nice shatter, nice immortality field to save Queen and THK, but Tay not so lucky. You can still charge people out of it, and it's really rough for Xavier as well. Close to an EMP and on a grab, but not quite in time, and Fiery Society just get a better fight.
It was. I mean, Fire Society, they get the shatter earlier, they get the Graviton Surge earlier, Satrok lands it as well, and he's been kind of the leader of the aggression in a way. He's been trying to find these pickoffs, he's been trying to find the damage onto Xavier, gets most of that done. Bello now back onto the Brigida going to the next push. They've already used the Baptiste for what it's worth, used that ultimate as well. They got the others now finally lined up.
This should be the push for Xavier, realistically speaking. Grav going to be out first. Fearless is just waiting for the right moment.
Just waiting to see EMP.
Yeah. I don't blame him, but he might have just ended up being too late because now Aros has been demeched and Iris got super low as well. EMP does at least still come out, and Xavier, they've kind of got just enough of a lead that now his ultimates start to expire. They're the ones with the sound barrier remaining, and they've got better positioning. They've still got a numbers advantage. Aros only just back in the mech now. Look for you gets picked off, and Xavier maintaining that numbers advantage. Nice high ground for Lone Fills. Gets to free fire for quite a while, and this is Xavier just getting enough done with their ultimates.
And this time around, because you don't have the Transcendence, you don't have a good way of countering out both the Graviton Surge and the EMP. You have to pick one. And you see Fearless trying to save it for the EMP itself, but eventually was forced to use it to save his own members from the grab. So for Xavier Esports, they banked up the right amount of ultimates. Took them a while to get there. They had to fail a couple of pushes to be in a position where they're absolutely in the lead, but they have finally capped out A. They are going to be pushing into B. Lone Phil's on 64% on his way to his next EMP, and THK on 88. So in terms of actually charging up the next wave of ults, they're nearly there.
And that was actually one of the advantages of how the fight played out, because the ultimates kind of connected. They slowed down Fiery Society. Xavier were able to sort of get on the point, be ready for a fight, and also got a D-mech. So it wasn't a perfectly even fight anyway for Fiery Society, because it ended up taking a bit of time, and Xavier kind of had to, if you will, manually get kills. They weren't necessarily getting them off the back of their ultimates. They end up actually charging up a lot more ultimates again, which is really going to help them now moving into streets.
Yeah, and they need to make up for the time they lost on A, right? Because we mentioned, okay, they did lose a lot of time on A. To get to C and to be able to finish this map, they need to now be able to push through B quite quickly to be able to regain that lost time and then go into C with a relative decent bank to work with, because otherwise you don't see them finishing the map.
This is where Xavier, ideally they want to use an ultimate other than EMP and use that to get into EMP. Iris going to come on in with the counter to that. That's a bit of a rough one though. THK dying to the self-destruct. Now Xavier have to decide, do we commit more ultimates? They decide yes.
Oh,
that's
Queen.
A good shatter though from Queen. They do have to commit the sound barrier as well, but this still is good for them. They've been able to charge up the EMP, and they do still have a Transcendence for a subsequent fight.
And you're glad that Queen was able to land that shatter. In fact, gets himself to 49% afterwards. So, I mean, that's half of his ultimate charged back up off of one ultimate being used already, and you need to see plays like this because unfortunately THK has found himself in multiple situations where he uses the Graviton Surge and dies while trying to deal damage in his own grav. Happened more than once so far in the series, and for Xavier, that's something they got to look out for.
I would also say THK dying means he ends up quite behind on his ultimate charge, but he has been able to charge it up pretty quickly, so I don't know how much I really consider that. I suppose we'll have to wait and see. What I would need to see from Xavier now, though, is a good EMP, and, well, Fearless is in with the answer, and Alone Phils is already dead. He ends up having to use Transcendence as well against a grab that Red and Evil, who also was not hacked, was able to get off. Good shatter again from Queen, who was able to charge it back up. Like
That got one too, though.
Yeah, and no one could follow up on Queen's one because Alone Phils was dead and THK was low.
And I'll tell you what, something else about the Gravitons coming out from Xavier as well. Okay, yeah, maybe he can kind of keep up the grabs, but the grabs haven't been useful. They haven't been game winning, so getting a bunch of grabs that don't do a lot also don't help Queen now. That was that huge shadow that kind of saves him, saves the rest of his team as well. Surprisingly, wasn't able to get blocked out. I mean, I guess for the side of Sadshok, might not have had his shield up in time or have any shield at all because, like you said, it was a huge enough wind-up in terms of animation because he was so far up in the air that you'd expect for Firing Society should have been telegraphed enough to be able to counter. But they get to win the subsequent fight anyway, and now card positioning has been paused, 1 minute 12 left on the clock.
This is potentially quite good for Fiery Society. Xavier in a rebuilding phase, and while they're rebuilding, the cart's not moving, but the clock's still running.
Fire Society hold on to the majority of the ultimates here as well. THK and Xavier still looking for a couple, getting quite aggressive.
Just popping the grab and pushing on in. They find THK, and I mean, the damage output from Xavier was kind of there. It was going on to Aros, and he was even hacked out, which meant he wouldn't have been able to self-destruct if he was going to lose the mech, but they didn't quite finish that off before Fiery Society got on top of them.
And that was the most economic play as well because they just used the rally, and off of that, you can see Look For You getting right into the thick of things. And for Fiery Society, it was just a tempo play. I mean, they're winning what is basically at this point a neutral plus a rally, so it's neutral plus a little bit of extra. But for Fiery Society, this is where they've been winning this entire series. We're back onto charging the EMP now, 88% for Alone Phils in what will possibly be the last fight.
No matter how it goes, it'll certainly be an impactful one. That's the grab first, self-destruct and Transcendence. They've quite liked using that self-destruct to prevent follow-up. Huge shatter from Sadshok once again, but this time Xavier don't quite fall prey to all the damage after the fact, and instead are able to push back thanks to the buying the team some time with the Transcendence. They do also commit the EMP as well, so Xavier looking a little bit more comfortable, but they are in the overtime.
And Fearless was only about at 90% when the EMP came down as well, so wasn't in a position to save his team with that sound barrier after Transcendence was already used for the Graviton Search. And now Xavier, they still have a shatter available. They actually have a slight ult advantage here. You do expect Fire Society to get these ultimates out though.
That's the one thing you do have to consider. Nice hack on Sadshok, but they need to make that count for something. It's a sound barrier committed there from Tate a little bit earlier than Fearless's own, and now Rally available as well. Xavier don't have anything left in the tank.
Queen?
THK gets a grab, but Queen's dead, Bellow's dead, and Fiery Society again just confident to push into Xavier, who otherwise had no ways to recover a fight. They end up holding the payload.
This might be a breakthrough performance for Look For You today because that might be his third ultimate shutdown, just him. With that shield bash, you can see Queen trying to go for the Earth Shatter, stunned up, couldn't quite finish the animation. That could have been the saving play again. They've been relying on these Earth Shatters to save themselves from really tough situations before, and note that that was the advantage they walked in with because both teams had a sound barrier. The only difference was the Earth Shatter that was then taken off the table by Fiery Society. So once that's gone and we're back into a neutral state again, that's what we're really going to talk about here. And also the cart has a bit of wood jammed in the wheels, so that's probably why it's not moving very quickly. But aside from that, I mean, I'm pretty sure this is number 3. It's at least number 2.
Yeah.
We saw another possible cancel on Alone Phils off screen. I think I'll count that, so I'll say 3 for now until otherwise. But it basically comes down to Fire Society have consistently outplayed Xavier in those neutral fights where there isn't really ults to think about, or the ults are exactly the same. And when it comes down to just pure damage output in neutrals, Fire Society win every time.
Which is pretty incredible to say. And now Xavier are in a situation where, close as they may have been, they didn't quite cap B. It does mean that Fiery Society, effectively, they only have to make it to the end of Streets Phase here, and they clinch the series as a whole. 3-2 something, might be a 4-0 even. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves. Xavier could still pull out an impressive defense, but they kind of limped their way through several points of that offense, and now I don't really know how much you can believe in the comeback.
And you start to look at Xavier and you think about that A, it was like very slow, but they got there eventually. You think about their B and you're looking for how they can make up for that time, and it just did not happen at all. Now the worst case scenario, they have to get a really good hold on either A or B. For Fiery Society, they're going to do the same thing they did on Volskaya, rush to that point, or rotate somewhere around that point, force Xavier's hand.
We needed to see them recover during the break, and they haven't. So now they have to recover in the second half of just this map. Alone Phil's only 30% to the EMP. They're again relying on what is a very slow wind-up.
And look at Queen's HP. Keep your eye on that one because he's been consistently focused down, targeted so heavily, and often the first member down as well.
And there you have it. They just push in on Queen. They find a stun. He's super low. Tay ends up being the first casualty, but only by the breadth of a hair. Now Queen goes down, and Fiery Society, they sort of, wipe their hands together and say, my job here is done. They can just walk down onto the point now, keep pumping damage into Xavier. Eventually, Xavier just have to jump down, give up their lives, knowing that they probably don't take a fight, and the cap goes through with 5.5 minutes.
And you're looking at 5:30, and there's probably no way here that Fiery Society failed. This is going to be a 3-0 on the scoreboard, because in this amount of time, they just have to push up to the end point of B. They don't even need to finish that camp because, well, Xavier didn't camp B themselves. So Fiery Society got a very, very good objective in a very short amount of time ahead of them, and Xavier got a big job and no ultimates.
Fiery Society, speaking of ultimates, look, they don't have any, but they're ahead in the charge of all of the most important ones. The only one where Queen is really keeping pace is in that Shadow, or rather Xavier keeping pace with Queen. The EMP is at least something Xavier can lean on, but it hasn't worked in the past.
There's a Transcendence now. There's also a Transcendence for Iris, so that even then they haven't really kept up in that regard.
Oh, they've already managed to kill Queen thanks to Satchok. Again, just the heads-up play on a strong Earth Shatter. Alone Phils wasn't even able to commit an EMP.
And by the way, this time it was a true 5v5 because Alone Phils was on a flank, Fearless, or rather Iris, was hiding as well. Xavier played into the 5v5, was kind of even-ish ultimates on both sides. No longer even because Fiery Society won. Look for a sneaky grab from Red and Evil.
Yeah, Fiery Society really just now miles ahead. The EMP is still there, but thanks to that grab, no one can follow up on it. Nice play by Fiery Society. They are aware of what Xavier have to use for this fight. They know how to shut it down. They plan it, they play it, they execute it efficiently and effectively. They're going to be rewarded with capping this payload. Queen's Shatter nowhere near enough to turn it back around. Not going to be the hero play. Far East Society are going to pull off what I can only really call an upset, and suddenly they're looking like a whole new team.
And this is where, again, you have to look at the script again and say, in week one, when Jupiter lost to Xavier, it felt like an upset because of what Jupiter represented at the time, where Xavier was, especially in previous seasons. Now you're deeper into the tournament, you realize that wasn't really an upset. That was Jupiter playing to the level of the season that they're at. And that was also Xavier kind of stepping up. But now you're looking at this game as well, and you're realizing that Xavier, okay, they beat what is looking like the weakest team in the region currently. They lost to two of the best teams. But now Fiery Society are able to ramp up. They've had one good win in their past week versus Jupiter. Again, one you're not sure if you really want to buy into, but this time beating Xavier, so far 3-0, and I believe it will be a 4-0. This is now a win you can be quite confident about for for Fiery Society, as they try and match Greenleaves, who have also taken a big win recently.
I mean, this is incredible. Like this, we talk about how that kind of the threshold for safety, assuming all things remain even, is at least 2 wins. And, well, Fiery Society have accomplished that. Greenleaves have accomplished that. And suddenly we're looking at this standings going, which team is leaving? Because it's more than likely going to be a long-standing part of the Pacific region.
2 of our returning teams are very likely to get relegated at this stage because 2 of them are currently sitting winless. Xavier have just lost another match, and it could still look even worse if they don't pick one back up. But you start to look at the series, and you're looking at Ilios and thinking, okay, that was close. You're not too sure whether you buy into Fiery Society winning just yet. You look at Volskaya, you're thinking, okay, that was much better. But also Xavier kind of just, I don't know, they mucked up a lot. That seemed really uncharacteristic in terms of a loss. Now you go into Hollywood, you see how dominant that was. A hold on to B, followed by one attempt all the way through A and B just to cap it in record time. It was nothing short of pure dominance. You are now fully convinced, or at least I am fully convinced, that Xavier are definitely the weaker team in the series, and Fiery Society deserve to win this one wholeheartedly.
And the thing that's quite scary is, look, if we do want to actually unpack that hypothetical of which returning teams get relegated, let's talk about the fact that in the course of the Pacific region, Xavier are the ones who most recently have been the returning team that has hovered the closest to relegations. Look, they had a real pickup towards the later parts of Season 1 this year. That was well worth mentioning. They also did still genuinely start this season looking stronger than last season, but the reality might just be that the level of competition at large has still outstripped Xavier's improvement, and they are still that returning team hovering the closest to relegations. Maybe this season is the breaking point.
And now, final opportunity here. Map 4 is coming up soon. The final game mode will be on Escort, so let's go ahead, take a look at that.
Welcome to Watchpoint Gibraltar. This is Escort. Two teams face off as either defenders or attackers. This is the payload. The attacking team has a limited amount of time to escort the payload along a set path containing 3 checkpoints. The payload only moves forward when an attacker stands near it. Defenders can delay the payload's movement by standing nearby at the same time. To get moving again, attackers must clear away the defenders by force. Every time the payload reaches a checkpoint, the attackers score 1 point and gain additional time on the clock. If even one attacker is near the payload when the clock runs out, the game enters overtime. This extends play indefinitely until the attackers are either cleared off the payload or they gain more time by reaching a checkpoint. The round ends when the payload reaches the destination or when time runs out. Teams switch sides each round. Whichever team scores the most points and escorts the payload farthest wins.
We are back to Havana for map number 4 here, and in some ways, this should, on paper, be a better map for Xavier, who are favoring the Sombra gameplay so far. On Havana, you've got a lot more space to work with, a lot more high ground to work with, but not sure if that is going to be enough for Xavier to come back in, because even in the EMP scenarios, it seems like it's not about, okay, we're not seeing enough EMPs. We're seeing plenty of EMPs. It's more so that when we do see them, so far they've been either cancelled or when they do go off, they don't get a win. When you don't get a win off an EMP, that's a big problem.
And that's the thing. Like, yeah, you can say on balance, a good Sombra team, you know, that's running the 3-2-1 should beat a 3-3 team on Havana, but I don't know if we can actually count Xavier as being a good 3-2-1 team right now, purely because, like you said, unfortunately, the mileage hasn't been there from the actual EMPs themselves. And look, that's to say nothing of the extra sort of percentage mileage you can get from good hack targets on the right click and all the extra little microcosmic facets of playing an effective Sombra. Just want everyone to know that we are currently seeing a pigeon pecking a pasty.
Just want everyone to know that
patio.
That is very impressive to me, also.
Here we go. Check. Look at that. Look at him go.
So accurate, because it's also like he's kind of looking out, it's like, oh, is someone going to catch me here?
I also like how it implies everyone abandoned their food as the fight came into town, but the pigeons were like, you know, score.
Also, very similar to Sombra game.
Ooh, Bello gets
chicken.
Absolute
If anyone's
necked.
looking at you, and you're right, look, awful start for Xavier.
This is kind of what Far East Society are wanting. They took this very aggressive position. It's, you know, high risk, high reward. They get rewarded now with a second kill onto Thea. They do lose Iris in the rotation because THK does still get a lot of free fire, and still finding kills though, Far East Society.
So eventually, this Farah should be able to overcome Far East Society, because Far East Society do not have a composition that can really do a say as he goes down. However, enough losses have been incurred for the defense that eventually Xavier will just kind of overpower them with respawns.
It's a really brutal sleep on to look for you as well. Will not be walking out of that one alive. But look, Far East Society sort of got what you want. You kind of want to get a bit of an early fight there, knowing that you'll probably lose eventually and burning time off the clock. They still get another fight later on A, so that does pan out. But they did maybe give up more charge than they should have.
And it depends who holds on to the charge, because so far 4 members have swapped. So 2 members at most will hold on. Now it's just 1 member. And that's just kind of the early advantages being given away. I will say Xavier, going on a DPS comp early, especially the Farah, gets that early defense out of the way for Far East Society. And now with the full swap, they get no ultimates out of that victory.
I mean, this is now It's full benefits for Far East Society. They get to take the early fight, they get to burn a minute off the clock, and now they get to come into this fight with far more ultimate charge in the back pocket.
We talked about neutrals they've been winning. Well, this one's definitely not going to be a neutral. They got 2 ultimates now. Grab's already in.
That's a lot of pressure onto Queen. Shorter drop, Alone Fills DMAC. By the way, Alone Fills onto the Diva. They're not even wanting to ball with the Sombra anymore. It's not worked out, but I mean, at least for that fight, the Diva didn't really do much more either.
I'll tell you what, I'm in 2 minds about this because on one side, I'm looking at Havana saying that, okay, this should be a better map for Lone Falls and for Xavier playing the Sombra. At the same time, I haven't really been convinced by the Sombra in the first place. So both of those things kind of sing true in a way where you should be playing the comp that you've been practicing, but also if it's not working, don't play it.
I don't know that Xavier even have time to recover the economy here. Far East Society used 1 ultimate in that last fight. They're using 2 ultimates now, if you include the rally. They've already found the 1 pick. They might even get a late one on Queen, and now DMAC on Alone Fills burns even more time. They can just walk back to the payload, still with a huge ultimate advantage that Xavier are not close to closing, and there's only a minute and a half left.
And the self-destruct ult charge gets reset for Alone Fills as well, as he has to swap heroes to even get back in the mech, unless he wants to stay on the McCree, which I don't expect that he will. And now you're in a really weird spot where, honestly, this would be the best time to go on to Sombra anyway, because you've lost your ult charge anyway. If you are going to make any swap, do it now. However, you are severely behind in terms of timing. You would have probably already had an EMP by now. You could have probably had that fight. I'll go back to that very first engagement. It was kind of good and bad for both sides because great for Far East Society to get an early fight to kind of soft win. Eventually they do get pushed off, so you call that one technically a loss eventually, but they got all the ultimates, and that would have only been a true loss if the ultimates got to be leaned in on by the side of Xavier. However, Xavier didn't really want to play DPS anyway. They only did it to get that early defense away. They wanted to push away that initial aggressiveness for Far East Society by playing fires and playing things that they can abuse from spawn that cannot be effectively handled by the defensive comp. But once that's over, they don't get to lead into this. So I'm in a mind where maybe they stick on the fire. Maybe they stick on to all those heroes and keep pushing their way through because, look, Ryan Goats is still being played by Fire Society. The Fire is still going to be good.
And the problem is, when a team is doing that really advanced defense on Havana, by advanced I mean far forward, they're doing it for exactly the reason that they're not necessarily expecting to win a lot of fight there at all. Like, maybe you get a pick early, even just having a long fight wastes some time, and you can then come in later on A, because Havana being such a long map, wasting time is a very effective way to create a winning situation for you. And that's why I say Xavier ultimately making that swap just gives Far East Society the full benefits. They're even going back to the cart still way further forward than you would usually take your secondary defense on A after that very far forward defense.
And that's because they've reset so quickly in Fire Society. Okay, they lost some members. They kept all the ult charge. They went right back in, saw that it was Ryan Goats playing on the side.
Slow swaps.
And they're thinking, this is actually great for us because now they don't have any ultimates. They've confirmed there's no ultimate because they know there's been a full range of swaps. And it's just all bad news for Xavier. Alone Phil's going to stay on the Diva now, back to 0% charge for him.
Rough.
The good news is Fire Society had to use most of their ultimates, so they don't have as much this time around, and Xavier will have a slight lead.
So far, though, Xavier have done an excellent job of playing right into Far East Society's hand. We'll have to see if they actually make good on the ultimates they've banked up this time.
And you want to see Queen and THK get something done here because they do have the ultimates in play. There's the grab.
Again, I like the self-destruct from Aros to sort of hamper, and they've done it piled up on their own grab as well. So late transcendence from Demon.
Nice.
Good shatter out from Queen. Able to finally start getting some of these ones through, and that's going to be the point for Xavier. Surely, as they clean up the rest of these members, Aros now going to go down quite late. So Xavier, they do still get the benefit of the ultimates they're banked up, but this is very little time remaining.
And I'll tell you what, Queen's been the boon for this team so far. Unfortunately, he goes down very early quite a lot because he does get focused on, but when he's alive, he gets those shatters in there. A lot of the fights that Xavier have won have been off the back of Queen shatters, and now going into point B, finally, they have some time remaining, a decent amount of time to make some good progress. Can they finish capping B will be another story.
I mean, there's practically no such thing as snowballing all the way through B on this map, especially not in the GOATS meta.
Unless the defense team does something horribly.
Yeah, and I don't think Far East Society are going to.
In fact, Fire Society are gearing up now. They have Sound Barrier coming up online. Nice boop just to keep Queen away, and this is a really difficult place to push. You can start to see why. You've got multi-angles to deal with. Lucio's just preventing you from taking the high ground.
And already it's a minute off the clock, so again, even if Far East Society do not win this fight, they've still effectively done what the defense wants to do here. Better yet, they've just killed Queen. THK's grab comes out, no one can follow up on it. Irish just commits Transcendence, no problems there. Even more time being lost now as Far East Society win the fight.
And that was a big win because Xavier expended resources to do that. They thought, okay, maybe we can use this Graviton Surge and find something. Queen's your main member. If he goes down, you're not getting any damage done. You haven't taken the high ground. How are you supposed to push into this grab when Fire Society can collapse on you so effectively?
Xavier don't really have a lot to bring to bear here either. Far East Society have more.
Up the top high ground again?
Yep, this is becoming a bit excruciating, shall I say.
Look at Fearless. He's just hanging around the top, just booping members off. Queen once again on the low ground. They just cannot take this fight.
Oh, Aros doesn't even finish getting demacked, and now Xavier, they can just get pushed in on. Irish found Tay, so they've got an extra shot on that one, and I mean, that also took so long, and it was a lot of Xavier just kind of doing nothing, standing around, getting bumped off high ground, and Far East Society will still have more ultimates for the next fight.
And you can see how difficult this point is to push, and just exactly the key reasons why, because this high ground is so incredibly strong, especially in a GOATS meta, and also the only way to fight against it is to try and challenge the high ground. However, it's difficult to do when you're just continually getting bumped off. You need to be able to push Fearless away, because Fearless is being the member that really stops the push coming in. Xavier taking a different approach to going to the other side, so swapping ends now, but expecting Fearless to still do the same amount of damage.
And there's still not a lot left on the clock. Once again, now Far East Society can pile on top of Xavier. They grab the few members still on the high ground to even eat a grab of their own, but who's going to follow up? And half of Xavier weren't even on that part of the map, and now the rest of Xavier get absolutely hammered down. Less than 30 seconds to go. Far East Society are being handed this defense on a silver platter.
And I don't think Xavier know how to approach this point properly. You're going to have another stagger as well into lone fills, which obviously doesn't help, but you need to be looking out for Fearless, because he's the one that's going to disrupt your push the most. On top of that, you need Tay to be doing the same thing. You need to be putting everyone on the ground, or making sure you are not being put on the ground.
Now this has got to be the one for Xavier. This is the one where they've had the most ultimates, but they've already lost a member. Now they don't even have a numbers advantage. And Far East Society have a lot of ultimates of their own. Satchok commits in. And it does connect, but they couldn't follow up. Now it's Queen's turn. That one also connects, but again, they don't quite get the kills. Queen gets bumped off to the other side, a little bit isolated here. Could be in trouble, able to regroup, but Xavier's still taking the pressure the whole time. Bello gets fixed, Queen gets opened up on. And the grab can just kind of ward people off at this point. They kill a lone fills, THK not going to last much longer, and it is all over. But the crying here, that is a masterclass defense for Far East Society.
And it is also a very good example of, unfortunately, what it looks like when you're on the receiving end of that, because once you're set up in this position, and I mean, it seems in many cases somewhat unbeatable. You can see Xavier just scratching their heads. How do we want to approach this one? We've gone up the left side twice, 3 times in a row unsuccessfully. Got the right side 1 time. That was unsuccessful as well. And unfortunately, there just isn't a good way in. The current positioning is so far back onto B. Realistically, all you got to do is cap A, and then you've probably won.
I mean, it's just...
This is THK going down?
Yeah, that's so huge. I mean, it's part of the benefit of having high ground, I suppose, but how many times can that happen?
I want to talk about Aros's off angle here as well, because as Xavier, every single time they're trying to push up on the high ground via the stairs, Aros is doing a ton of damage to them from the backside. And because you have so many angles to work with, Fearless is also hovering around the top edges, near the ceilings in many cases, just to get these boops onto specifically Queen, because if he's on the ground, suddenly the entire Xavier squad is open up, and they all have to go on the ground as well to meet Queen.
That was rough for Xavier, to say the least.
And Xavier now need a full hold on A. If they do not get this hold on A, they lose, because B is not enough spacing at all, not enough distance made whatsoever. The best they can do here, get themselves that 1 map win in the series, but as was mentioned following Hollywood, for me it looks like a 4-0.
They kind of have to take this play. They kind of have to try and do the same thing, burn time off the clock.
Tell you what though, when and if they lose this, it will be Far East Society holding on to all their ultimates.
And that's the difference maker here. Xavier have to do this, but there is still a potential downside, and that is if your opponent wins so demandingly that they charge up ultimates where you get nothing, especially if they win like this, where they're routing Xavier back. This isn't even stopping the cart movement, and it's an unmitigated disaster for Xavier.
Xavier didn't even push in. They had the high ground advantage on top of the gas station. They didn't drop down. They didn't take that fight. If you paid attention to the HP bars there, Xavier got taken down at half across basically all their members almost immediately. Fiery Society, their lowest member was about Aros, nearly on half HP. The rest of them, pretty healthy. Fiery Society basically took no damage.
And even then, you wouldn't even care if Aros got demech'd in this if you can still beat Xavier. Aros can just walk back to spawn and swap the mech out. Xavier now, they do still get that second fight on C, but like we said, this time they come into it behind the ultimate charge.
Queen's being batted around. If he goes down early, that's bad news.
Every single time. Now they look to put the pressure on Alone Fills. That's one more tank out of the picture. They find Tay. No ability to retreat. The rest of the members are sitting ducks, and if anything, those ducks are on an ultimate farm. Now, Fiery Society able to get this cap with plenty of time on the clock.
Now it's time to get your ducks in a row because Fiery Society are on their way to this 4-0 look for you. Dancing on the point even, taking high ground very early with Red and Evil nearly sitting on a grab.
And Xavier sounding like a whole bunch of quacks here. Grav's going to come out super clean here from Fiery Society. Taking this fight in a really nice position as well. Again, just keeping it away from the payload.
And how quickly they transitioned into B, taking the high ground straight away. Red Nibbles right there, Setchok right behind him, getting those ultimates in play as well. Look how many ults they have. This is now going to be Xavier re-pushing onto high ground as the defensive team while the card is nearly at the finish line.
And honestly, I don't see what Xavier do in this fight, especially without Tay. They're barely getting to the payload in time. Queen goes in for the charge. Thea will commit a Transcendence to try and keep the team alive on it a bit longer, but they're not getting any kills for their trouble anyway, not even with THK's grab. Queen is already dead, cannot follow up. Self-destruct to find Thea. THK goes down, and that is all she wrote. Fiery Society going to complete the 4-0.
And this time, it's all over, including the crying, at least for Xavier's case, and the 0-4 result is going to be quite the shame considering how they, again, we say started off the season, great win versus Jupiter. Now you look back at that and think like, oh, well, maybe that was just going to be a win regardless. And unfortunately, their third loss so far of the season, first one versus a up-and-coming Trials team. They have Green Leaves later on in the season, but it's getting shaky for Xavier. You're now losing a lot of confidence in this team. You're gaining equally now confidence in Fiery Society. What has been lost for one team is gained for another, and both our Trials teams suddenly looking very, very good. And also speaking to the side of the new players on Fiery Society as well, certainly haven't noticed a drop in quality. In fact, you probably say you've noticed a upgrade in quality, so things are working out.
And that's what we say, you know, usually if you're going to bring in players partway through a season, especially for, you know, newcomer type teams, often it tends to be a one-to-one upgrade in the role. And I mean, I would say that's been the case for Fiery Society, and it also feels like they've been able to unlock more out of other players. Look, we already know that Satrok is a quality main tank player. He is a great fit for this team, but we're starting to see more and more and more coming out of a lot of these other members now. Look for you especially really felt like he just stepped up a whole level for this match. And I mean, like you said, you know, as one team falls, another team rises. You recontextualize Fiery Society. They beat Jupiter. We go, well, that's expected. They've still got to prove themselves. This has been Fiery Society unequivocally proving themselves.
And you also see, okay, they lost 0-4 to Talon, but everyone will probably lose 0-4 to Talon this season. You also have a case where they took the Global Esports to 2-3, and at the time you're thinking, oh, this is kind of an unexpected result. Right. Now you're thinking, actually, that makes total sense considering what we just saw in this particular match. And on top of look for you, we already talked about Satchuk, but Red and Evil I'd like to add to the list as well. He was already a player that I had my eyes on and was kind of saying, hey, this is someone you got to look at, especially on the Zarya position. And now he's really stepping up to the plate as well. A lot of players on this team, a lot of names on this team where for them it's their first ever Contenders season, and yet they're performing well above expectations.
And look, when we came into the start of the season, we said, look, Talon have leveled up. Talon are the team that have really made some great upgrades. They won last season. They look even better. It's now actually looking like the region as a whole has leveled up. The talent is stronger. The teams are better. The newcomers are hot contenders once again. That's not something we've realistically had since Ardeont came into OPC Season 2 and absolutely curb-stomped everyone. That's not quite what's happening here, but there is still big potential talent coming through. And that does mean that teams that don't keep up will end up dropping out. Maybe teams like Jupiter, Cyclone Coupling, Xavier just don't make the cut anymore.
I will say, though, despite Ardia not being here, the legacy they leave behind of curb-stomping teams, well, I guess Talon is kind of living up to that name currently. They're the ones that are curb-stomping everyone and don't look like they'll be stopping anytime soon. We have now finished up our first match of the evening in Week 4. When we come back from the break, it's going to be Jupiter and Nova MS, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this.